We're going to open straight into God's Word today in Mark chapter 2. And every week on your way in, if you don't have a Bible in front of you, you can grab a Bible now on your way in. There'll be a pile there. Or you can download our church app that has a free Bible that you can read on your phone. We'll have the verses on the screen, at least today, for you to follow along too. Mark chapter 2, this is what we read. Then Jesus went to the lakeshore again and taught the crowds that were coming to him. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at his tax collector's booth. "Follow me and be my disciple," Jesus said to him. So Levi got up and followed him. When you read these stories of Jesus, time after time after time again, there's a particular word that keeps coming through. It's this word, follow. It's uttered by Jesus again and again and again. He calls out to diverse groups of people, ranging, with career backgrounds from all the way from fishermen right through to, financiers, and he says, follow. He cries out to people then that had very different political viewpoints, from people that were, content with the government of the day right through to those that were opposed to the government, and he said, follow. He calls out to women, he calls out to men and says, follow me. And Jesus doesn't just say follow back then. He says follow me today. I responded to that invitation when I was 10 years old. For me, it was expressed in a prayer at the time that acknowledged, Jesus, I don't want to follow other things in my life that would try to find life and hope and meaning and purpose. I want to find these things in you, so I'm choosing to follow. And probably the majority of us here in this room would see ourselves as followers of Jesus. That's how we define Christian, isn't it? Somebody who is a follower of Jesus. But what does it mean to follow? What does it mean to say I'm a follower of Jesus? It's what the series Jaywalk is really all about, trying to answer that question. And it shouldn't really be a complicated answer, should it? Because follow just simply means to go alongside of somebody, follow behind them. So wherever Jesus goes is kind of where we should go. Whatever Jesus is doing, that's what we should be doing. But it seems like the way we often think of follow becomes so much of a past thing, past activity that doesn't always express itself in this present pursuit. So follow becomes something we did in the past, and then we turn that into a noun. I'm a follower of Jesus, rather than an active pursuit of following Jesus. So again, I want us to look at what does it look like to follow? Where is Jesus going? What is Jesus doing? Because whatever Jesus is doing, wherever Jesus goes, that's what it means for us to be following him, right? So in the story, we see some of the answers here. In fact, every time you look at these stories of Jesus through the four gospel accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, I don't know if you've noticed it before, but it's full of all these different parties. People coming together and around a meal, and all these different people are there. It's just party after party after party. And as I've looked at this, I've kind of narrowed it down in my mind to two different types of parties. The first type of party I would describe as the exclusive affair. And let me illustrate it this way. Let's grab these. I'll be back in a moment. I am coming back. Let me illustrate it this way. I'll cut this one off, actually. Come back to that in a moment. Probably like this group here, three white, well-shaped balloons, all the same. 2,000 years ago, there's a particular group of people we could describe as having the exclusive party. And that would be the Pharisees. In fact, even the name Pharisee in Hebrew means something like separatist. So this is the elite group, the exclusives. Now, if you've been in church for a while, you've probably heard their name before, and you probably have this negative perception of them. You think of them as like snobby, arrogant, self-righteous. But 2,000 years ago, you would have wanted to be like these people. If you were living then, your mother would have said to you, why can't you be more like, Pharisee Paul? I mean, look at him. He's got life together. He's wealthy. People like him. He's respected wherever he goes. Why can't you be like him? And it's one of those few times in life that you would have kind of agreed with your mother and said, yes, I would like to be like him too. Because they were the popular people. I remember back in school days, there was always a group of people that were popular. They had it all together, that kind of, looked a particular way. They all hung out together, and it might really be a shock to you, but I was not one of those people. I wanted to be like those people, and I would, try to get into their group, but I was never accepted by the cool kids. The Pharisees, it might be surprising to you, but the Pharisees were the cool kids of the day. They were the popular group. Everybody wanted to be just like them. They had it all together. They were respected by everybody. And they would hold these exclusive parties where everybody like them came, but no one else was allowed in. There's another group of parties you could look at in the Gospels, these accounts of Jesus. And I would call it the inclusive parties. These exclusive affairs were for the Pharisees, the separatists, the elite. I guess these other parties are, for everybody else. You could illustrate it this way. They're kind of a wild-looking group, aren't they? Different shapes, different sizes, lots of, things going on. It's just this wild, colorful group of people. In our story, there's a particular phrase used for this group. It's the sinners and tax collectors. Now, the tax collectors were a group of Israelite people who, were under Rome, because all the Israelites were dominated by Rome. These Israelites, these tax collectors had decided, we want to be collecting tax on behalf of Rome. Rome just wanted to, gather as much money from all the people that were in their land as possible. And so they, rather than do that themselves, they would contract out. And different Israelites would put their hand up and would bid for that. And if they won, what they would do is they would have an office, typically by the lake, where they would collect taxes from people that would be sailing in and take a customs tax. They would go around the farms and collect land tax. And they would make a bid to say, if you choose me as your tax collector, this is how much money I will give to you and to Rome. And then there would be typically a surcharge on top of that to cover their own administration costs. Now, as you can guess, they weren't well liked by the other Israelite community. For one, they were kind of renowned to that surplus, that administration fee, was going towards them, and they seemed to live life pretty well as wealthy people. But not only that, but they were working for Rome. Rome is the enemy. Rome's like the traitor. And here are this Israelite community, people, they would bid for that. They'd want to help Rome. They weren't well liked. And so when you go back to some of the writings 2,000 years ago, this group is often referred to as, in the same category as murderers of the day. They weren't allowed to be judges in the courtroom. They weren't even allowed to be witnesses to something that happened in the courtroom. They just weren't trusted. These different writings will talk about, if your clothing, garment, touched that of a tax collector, it wasn't good for you. You became this unclean person. They weren't liked. This group really liked. Everybody wanted to hang out with them. This group, way too colorful, way too, wild and out there. And hang out with this group, it was going to taint your image quite a bit. In fact, one of the writings, we'll come to that later. Here in our story, there's a particular character that we've already seen. His name's Levi. Levi can be illustrated by this balloon here. He's a wild character. In our story, we've seen him by the lake. And what has he been doing? He's a tax collector. So Jesus has approached Levi, and you've actually probably come across Levi before. He has another name called Matthew. Scholars tend to agree that this Levi is none other than Matthew, who wrote the very first gospel account of Jesus. So Jesus walks into Levi's world, and he calls out to Levi and he says, follow follow me. And it's one of those great stories. Levi does exactly that. He steps out and he begins this pursuit of Jesus. No doubt there is a backstory in Levi's life. I'm sure if we could sit down and interview him to go, Levi, why would you want to be a tax collector? Is it, because you're going to lose so much, but he stepped into that, and I guess from financial security, or, he would ditch everything else in life to make it to the top. But when Jesus calls him, he doesn't say to Levi, you need to clean up your act. Levi, you need to look a little bit more slick. He just calls out to Levi, I want you to follow. And Levi does exactly that. These are the stories we typically love as a church community, isn't it? We love hearing stories of Jesus saving people who have misplaced hope and messed up lives. But what happens next? What does Levi do as he follows after Jesus? Let's continue reading. Later, Levi invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests, along with many tax collectors and other disreputable sinners. There were many people of this kind among Jesus' followers. So Levi goes after Jesus. Wherever Jesus goes, Levi's right there too. So when Jesus is preaching, as he typically did, and there's a big crowd of people around, Levi's there too. And I'm guessing one day he's there and he's looking at the crowd around, and he starts remembering his old days. And he starts to picture the names and the faces of people that he used to hang out with. And he looks back at the crowd and thinks, I'd love my buddies to be here too. I'd love my old friends to meet Jesus and experience exactly what I've experienced in life. He knows that his whole identity has changed. He's now found this hope and this security and this purpose in Jesus, and he wants that to be true for his friends too. And he sits back and goes, how do I get Jesus and my new friends together with each other, that my friends would find life too? And so he comes up with this plan in his mind. And he thinks, I wonder if I could host a party and gather all my friends together in the room, and then I'll get Jesus to step in as well, and all my new friends that are also followers of Jesus, and they'll engage with each other, and hopefully they'll find hope as well. So he goes up to Jesus and he pitches it to Jesus. Hey, Jesus, the background I come from, and Jesus, I've been thinking about all these friends that from my past, and they're a pretty wild, colorful group of people. But Jesus, I'd love them to meet you. And I know it's kind of a wild, out there idea, but I'm wondering if you would come to a party I'm hosting. And I wonder if the rest of the followers would come too, and they would just better be in the room together. Because I think something pretty special would happen. But Jesus, I know if you were to step into that party, it would probably put a black mark next to your image. Because, righteous people aren't meant to, hang out with the wild ones. But I'd really love that to happen. And you've already seen part of the story. What does Jesus do? Does he just kind of stay in a isolated group of righteous people? No, he goes to the party. And before you know it, the tax collectors and these disreputable sinners, as it talks about, are talking with each other. And these wild-looking people are just trying to work out, how can Jesus, who claims to be from God, why would he want to hang out with us? This doesn't happen to us. Nobody wants to hang out with us. We're the unpopular ones. And the message soon ripples through that whole community because it's a radical message and behavior. I was thinking about this week. Normally when somebody is perfect or thinks they're perfect, wild people don't want to be around them because they feel guilty or they feel pressured or they feel judged in some way. So how is it that the only perfect person in human history to have walked was actually, people found Jesus attracted from this community? I think it's just Jesus welcomed people as they were. There was no sense of condemnation or judgment. He enjoyed people's company. He welcomed people just as they were. It's what he does to Levi's friends. How do you think the other party felt about all this? How do you think this exclusive group over here, known as the separatists, the Pharisees, how do you think they reacted? Look here in the story. This is what we read. But when the teachers of religious law, who were Pharisees, saw him, Jesus, eating with tax collectors and other sinners, they asked his disciples. I always find that interesting why they'd ask the disciples and not Jesus. Often that happens when people have some concerns on their mind. Why does he eat with such scum? Well, they don't hold back in the language, do they? I mean, you could add the phrase, to scum, these tax collectors and other disreputable sinners. That's the way the exclusive religious folks saw the likes of Levi and his friends. It's easy, isn't it, for all of us here to criticize the Pharisees for the reaction, but try to see things from their perspective for a moment. Because when you hang out with wild, colorful folks like this, maybe their behavior will rub off on you and me, so stay away. And maybe if you hang out with people like this, people will think that you're endorsing their behavior and you accept what they're doing. Or maybe if you hang out with people like this, maybe you know what's going on, but the generation watching don't get that, and they'll endorse this, and they'll step into those practices too. You can see things from the Pharisees' perspective, can't you? See, the Pharisees thought, well, because sin is like a virus, that it's kind of out there, and people sneeze and all these kind of practices happen from the wild, crazy people, and so we need to kind of isolate ourselves from them and just hang out with people just like us. Otherwise, we might get contaminated. We might get sick. We might kind of catch this, immoral flu that they have. And there was a theological justification given for this group over here. They would often quote Bible verses like Psalm 1, that says this: "Oh, the joys of those who do not follow the advice of the wicked, or stand around with sinners, or join in with mockers." You should just hang out with the righteous. But that's not what the verse is saying, is it? It's saying don't take on the philosophy, the worldview, the behavior of this group. But it says nothing about don't associate, don't hang out with them, don't engage with them. But that's how this group understood it. Isolate yourself. In fact, so much so that one of the writings 2,000 years ago went this far. The wise say, "Let not a man associate with sinners, even to bring them near to the Torah." That's the Bible back that they had. So we can't even bring the Bible to this community because they're so immoral, maybe this will even get affected. It's kind of nuts. And yet there's a part of that I understand. You see, Psalm 1 is the verse that was given to me when I was baptized. And the way it was either communicated to me, or at least the way I understood it, was I'm meant to isolate myself. And it's okay to come to this group when you're, preaching a verse or maybe dropping in a gospel tract and kind of running away or doing something over here. But as long as you kind of come over to this group and find refuge and stay here, but certainly don't engage, don't hang out, don't go to their parties, don't do anything that is befriending them. That's the way I understood it. And so I remember, getting baptized at 13, and because I heard about, even the importance of the Bible, I would carry little Gideon's Bible in my pocket, as a 14-year-old off to school. And I would drop tracts, I would quote verses and do different things, but I disengaged with the non-Christian friends I had. And I got together a Christian group that we would hang out every single morning tea and lunchtime, and made sure that we weren't too close with this group over here. Easy for that to happen, isn't it? I understand where the Pharisees are. I think there's no other time like now that is so much easier for us to find Christian subcultures and isolate ourselves. Think about it. You want Christian TV? You find it. Christian radio, you've got different choices. You want Christian music, concerts, you can find that too. You want Christian schools for your kids? Whole selection of them. You want to have a job around the house? Why don't you get the Christian business directory and find a Christian builder and Christian plumber and Christian electrician and Christian architect? Want to join a sports team? Well, there's Christian sports teams. Now, I'm not saying we can't be part of these things, but it's so easy for us to isolate ourselves from wild, colorful people. So what's wrong with isolating ourselves? Why is it that Jesus doesn't isolate, but Jesus incarnates? You know, that theological term, talking about how he didn't isolate himself away from us, but entered into our world and actually stepped towards the wild, colorful ones. Why is it that Jesus did that, and why is it that we need to follow Jesus in the same way? Well, Jesus responds to the question the Pharisees have. Look at verse 17. When Jesus heard this, he told them, "Healthy people don't need a doctor. Sick people do. I have come to call not those who think they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners." So in defense of what Jesus is doing, he makes two arguments. I want you to lean into these to understand what it looks like to follow Jesus and why we follow Jesus towards the wild ones. Argument one, doctors hang out with sick people. Jesus says here, healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do. It's like Jesus is responding to the Pharisees saying, well, doctors are meant to help the sick, aren't they? You know, it's not like they do that because they like sickness. They do it because they have a cure. They're able to help. It'd be a crazy world, wouldn't it? You know, if the spiritual doctor didn't hang out with the spiritually sick. I mean, it would be just weird, wouldn't it, just in today's context, if doctors just got together and said, you know, patients are just a drag. You know, they're late, they're always in the waiting room, they're always coughing and sneezing, they're always whining and complaining about how they feel. You know, let's just ditch the patients, you know, and just get together in our own little doctor community. And, you know, we can talk about sickness, we can study sickness, we can research all these viruses, we can write articles about it, but let's not see any sick people anymore, because that's just a drag. That's Jesus' first point. Doctors aren't meant to isolate themselves. They're meant to engage where there's spiritually sick people. There's another reason Jesus gives. It's a little bit more subtle. Let's look at that verse again. He says, I have come to call not those who think they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners. Jesus says, unless people realize they are sick, a doctor can't help. The same is true in our spiritual state. Unless we acknowledge, hey, I'm sick, I need some help. Can you help me in the spiritual state that I have? It's like Jesus is holding up a mirror to this community of people, to the people that have isolated themselves and said, you know, do you see what you actually look like? You think that you are white and pure, but the reality is you're pretty messed up too. You have like spots all over you, you just can't see them, but internally, you're pretty messed up, you're pretty sick too. And I can't help you unless you acknowledge that you are unwell. That you would realize that sin is this deadly disease that penetrates every single part of our lives. And while everything can look good on the outside and this facade and on the inside, even if we don't realize we're sick, crazy sick. And we need help from a spiritual doctor. And maybe that's a wake-up call for some of us here because, you know, you might be new here today and you think that this is what you look like. Or maybe you've grown up here in church life and you think that, you know, other people, a little bit on the wild, crazy side and need some help, but you don't realize your own fatal situation. That you're affected by sin, just like everyone else. Probably expresses itself differently in your life as you pursue your identity or your security or your purpose and things other than Jesus. But just like the religious leaders then, like the Pharisees then, we all need Jesus today. So what does it look like to follow Jesus? To wrap up our reflections on this passage, I want to think about 3 types of people and what this word follow means for us as we walk towards Jesus and where Jesus goes. The first type of person I'm thinking about today is somebody that has never taken the first step towards Jesus. Every single week there are people here who don't yet know Jesus. It might be that somebody invited you to come along today, and out of politeness to them, you decided to come. And you kind of realized that this is your life. I spoke to somebody after the first service. I said, that's kind of me. I'm one of those pretty wild people right now. It might be that you've been coming here for quite a long time, and you kind of have seen yourself this way, but realized actually internally, I need some help. And for you today, the first step you need to take is to make that first step towards Jesus. It takes humility to acknowledge that you're spiritually sick and you need Jesus as your spiritual doctor. It takes humility to say, I've been looking for life and hope in my work and my relationships and all these things out here for meaning and for purpose and for security, but I'm coming now to find these things in Jesus. Jesus still calls people today from diverse backgrounds, from different postal codes, from different careers and different political views, and says to everyone, follow me. If you're in that situation today, the very first step is to take that first step towards Jesus. It might be that you're here today and you've taken that first step towards Jesus, but maybe you haven't really understood that our life is meant to be engaging with people, not kind of out here in our own little wee isolated community, but to incarnate where people live and people are. Let me give some ways that might look like for you to actually be part of engaging with other people. One of those ways is inviting people to different things that might be going on. Last week on your seats, we had a little invite card. There's a whole bunch you can get from the foyer afterwards. I encourage you to have a whole stack of them in the car or in your wallet. So when you're out and you meet somebody, it might be a colleague at work or it might be just somebody you've met, neighbor, and you find out, hey, you've just lost your job. And you can say to them, hey, our church has this CAP program, CAP Job Club, helping people write a resume, helping people prepare for interviews. It's completely free. Can I connect you so that you can get some help? And you write kind of the back of the invite card and you give it to them and you continue to pray with them and chat about how that's going. Or it might be that you meet somebody who's new to the country and you can tell them about our English classes. And just invite people to our services. As a side point, all of these services are designed to be accessible to people regardless of their background with Jesus. So the songs we choose, the way preaching happens, communication, everything is always trying to think about what it looks like for this group of people. We love singing, and we're not embarrassed about that, or at least most of the time. But we try to think about what are the songs that connects with this community of people over here. What type of communication will help connect with this group of people and change maybe some of the language and ways of doing things. So we work pretty hard at doing that all the time. Another way that you might do this is to engage in joining a team to serve. And just like last week, there's all these tables in the foyer. Great opportunity just to find out how you can serve here. Children's ministry, youth ministry, going out to rest homes, all these different things that we do to engage with people who don't yet know Jesus. And you can just sign up for one of those. If it's not you, you can, find something else down the track. I'd encourage you to grab that opportunity today. It might be giving, knowing that when you give, you're actually funding the help to engage with people here. And, you can find out about that too. There's all these different ways that we can get involved. It might also be hosting a party. The best story here, the best application I can see is for us to follow in the footsteps of Levi. For him it was, I'm going to host a barbecue at home. I'm going to host this party. I'm going to invite all my wild, crazy friends, and then I'm going to bring my Christian friends because I know Jesus wants to be here, and they're going to engage each other. And something cool might happen in the midst of that. It might be responding to the invitation of of people here and going to their parties, going to their special functions and just being part of that, because that's where Jesus is walking to, isn't it? So for you, following Jesus might just be taking a step to engage with people who don't yet know Jesus. There's a third type of person I'm thinking of. It's the type of person that has taken one, two, many steps towards Jesus, and then something happened where they just seemed to stop. And before they knew it, they were kind of over here, just hanging out with other Christian people, isolated. And before they knew it, it wasn't just kind of their practices, but something had changed in their heart, where they became more concerned about their own comforts than they were about what concerns the heart of God. And so often that's expressed in church world, where people start to think about, well, I don't like that song. I don't like how that was done. I don't like this, the way it's written. All these different things that come through. Rather than asking, what do we need to do to reach out to the wild, colorful ones? What does that mean in terms of maybe the songs that I would like to sing, being replaced with something a little different? Different lyrics, different musical style, different preaching styles, different ways that things are pitched, whatever. It's really easy over time, isn't it, to think about our own comforts and concerns and forget that God's concern is for people who don't yet know Him. And maybe that's where you are. And maybe the Spirit of God is nudging you today to say, don't isolate yourself, but incarnate. Don't withdraw and just kind of think about your own concerns and comforts, but step out and think about the concerns that God has for others. It might be that you need to remove yourself from some conversations here and do some pretty radical things to ensure that your concern and your practices and your heart are right here in the middle of the wild, colorful ones. This is where Jesus is. What Jesus is concerned about. What does it look like for us to step into this context? So following Jesus means going where Jesus is, hanging out with the people that Jesus hangs out with. So will you take that first step towards Jesus? Will you take steps to engage with others by inviting, by serving, by giving, by hosting, by barbecuing? And will you move from your concern with your own comfort and become more concerned with the concerns of God? I'd like to lead us in a prayer. In this prayer, I'm going to make a few statements, and at the end of them, to just give you the opportunity, the quietness of your heart, where you might just want to say a yes or a no, to acknowledge, this is what I want to say to you today, God. Let's pray together. Jesus, thank you that you didn't isolate yourself from us. Rather, you incarnated. You entered our very world. So today, I'm making a choice to move from the direction I have been heading in my life to follow after you, Jesus. Yes or no? Today, I'm making a choice to follow you in the way that you engage and serve others. Yes or no? Jesus, help me to serve, give, host, and invite. Yes or no? Today, I confess that I have been more concerned about my own comfort than I am with the things that concern you, Jesus. Yes or no? So help me be more concerned about spiritually sick people all around me. and do whatever is appropriate and necessary to reach out to them. Yes or no? Jesus, help me not to isolate, but to incarnate. Yes or no? Help me to follow you wherever you go. Yes or no? In Jesus' name, amen.